Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hey.
How you been doing?
Hey. Good. A little chilly.
Yeah, you look really bundled up today. You look like
I had to pull up my jackets.
yeah. You have a closet full of jackets, or maybe just
one
or two.
They're just kind of in the mix of everything else, and so then it's
I had to pull, 2 or 3 jackets.
Yeah.
And put them in the active rotation.
Yes, you got to put them in the active rotation. Then you got to figure out what fits. Now,
It's
from
a
9 months
surprise.
ago. Yeah,
like,
you just don't know.
I hadn't seen that thing in a while.
Yes.
Let's try that back on.
Yeah.
I know. I've been through it. Yeah.
And then I'm also like, man, why did I get rid of that jacket 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Should have kept it.
It was timeless.
I know, right? It was like, who knew jean jackets would come back?
Well, the Canadian tuxedo, to me, never goes out of style. Personally,
it's year round.
I'd like to have one in all colors if I could. So welcome, dear listener.
Yes. So fall. Did y'all do anything fun for fall break?
Fall break. So my wife did something fun.
Okay.
And we stayed here to support her.
Oh,
Well,
you and your daughter
and I.
Okay.
And my mother-in-law came into town to help support. And listen, I'm always happy to see her.
Yes.
She, what's so incredible about her, if she's listening, when we started dating, I'd go over to her house and, maybe she'd cook food for us, great food.
Yeah.
And then she'd do my laundry. So as a college student, you're really grateful that somebody would do your laundry. And she would immaculately fold the laundry, particularly my underwear. She folded that thing like she's in the Navy or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And come to find out her Brooke's dad was in the Navy.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
Yeah.
But she came back in this weekend, and guess what I found?
What's that?
Those beautifully folded underwear.
Yes. I like it.
It's so exciting.
When I was 20 years old, I guess, me and Laurie, we might have been dating a year, so I was 20 or 21. I had an opportunity to go to South Africa with a group of people. We were going, and we were actually putting on all the missionaries in Africa send their kids to a camp during the summer for 2 weeks or 1 week in South Africa. And so we were going to put on this camp for missionary kids. And so we go, and the first week we're staying in Cape Town in this, it's me and my buddy Aaron, and we're college students at Louisiana Tech, and we were going to do the worship and whatever. So the rest of the group got a house to stay in, and then down the street, they found a honeymoon suite at a house to rent for us. So we're staying in this honeymoon suite, and they still have maids. They have maids that take care of the house. It's very strange. So anyways, we go, it's pretty funny. So we go out the first day and we do some sightseeing. We come back, and the maid had my boxers on the clothesline, drying them out in the yard. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And she washed my really dirty college hat that I took pride in because it had some patina, if you will. And that thing was so white. I'm like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
You were supposed to wash that.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Well,
they all got a kick out of seeing my boxers.
Just aired out.
Just aired out.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody.
Yeah, there's an hidden saying about that. So we got to kind of make this a quick one today.
Yeah.
But
let's get to it.
You asked about a topic.
Yeah.
And my topic for the day is, I feel like all businesses everywhere are coming around, converging on this one topic.
Okay.
And come to find out, there was a big industry gathering in our industry where this was fully addressed. And it's something like this. The stats show today that in America, this is what I've read, that engagement with employees in America is not so good.
Yep.
So the numbers break down something like this. So 32% are actively engaged in their roles. 51% are about neutral. And then 17% are actively disengaged.
Yes.
Okay. So when you break that down out of 10 people in your team, you've got 3 people who are working hard, they're engaged, they feel energized. You've got everybody else kind of in the middle, and then you've got a very small handful of folks who are actively sabotaging your business.
Yes.
And those stats are really incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really incredible that there's so much of the workforce that is either neutral to disengaged.
Yeah.
And all these businesses are trying to come around and figure out why this is the case. So I'm going to throw that out there to you to start this off. Why are folks so disengaged in the workforce?
That's a good question. I would imagine the pandemic didn't do any favors.
Right.
For this, right?
Right.
I mean, you've really they're the ones that are somewhat engaged probably are somewhat engaged because because there's a boss looking over their shoulder. Mm-hmm. Right? Would you think that?
Well, I would slate those folks maybe in the middle, in the middle of the boat.
Yeah.
I think there are people who are genetically just probably predisposed to being engaged and invested in their work. But then there's certainly conditions that can knock people from one part of the boat to another.
Yeah.
Workplace conditions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So there's a book called Move Your Bus. I was just looking this up, and this reminds me of that book. And I think I've mentioned it before on here, have I?
I think
by
so.
Ron Clark. And his whole concept is that on your bus, your organization, you have runners, you have joggers, you have walkers, and you have sitters.
Right.
And the concept is that these people are making your bus move, right? Like the Flintstone style. Mm-hmm. But then he makes a point and he says the worst person to have on your bus is actually not a sitter, not the disengaged. The worst person to have on your bus is a runner running in the opposite direction. And so that, when you talk about actively sabotaging your business, right, they're actually doing some damage, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I think of, when I think of someone who is out of line in my organization. My first question is, well, how much influence do they have on others?
Well, and even if they don't have a lot of earned influence, it's going to permeate the atmosphere.
That's right.
Right? It's going to leak out to others. Mm-hmm. And when they're complaining or they're negative about every single thing, and some people just are, maybe, people are going to hear it and kind of go, if I don't disagree, why is he saying that?
Yeah.
Is there something there? And then now everybody's kind of like, you're right.
Yeah.
This does suck.
Yeah. Yeah. And we use the phrase, I don't know. It's maybe not the best thing to use, analogy to use, but when we have someone sideways, we say we have to remove the cancer. Like it spreads, right?
Yes.
Cancer unacknowledged and untreated is going to spread.
Right.
And that's what it is.
So since we don't have a lot of time, I looked up a few reasons in things that managers can do to lower engagement. And I want to run through these with
Let's do that. Let me ask you this. What's the best way? I think that some of our problem is we're not identifying, like we don't know how to identify these behaviors until it's gone on too long.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah. That's true.
So how would you identify or keep your pulse on this? Then address it. That's after, but how do you know?
A lot of times it's very difficult because you might, I don't know. I think I had a recent example of this and I heard 4 or 5 people mention something about it in just separate encounters.
Yeah.
Through the grapevine, I'd hear it's like, well, Tom said that. Like, And then, Amy said that. And then, once I heard it for the 4th time, I was like, well, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
Now, they weren't speaking directly to me, but, I kind of heard it from somebody else.
Sure.
So to me, in my most recent example of this, it was not unavoidable, but it got to me.
Yeah. Well, and it usually does get up to the top, right? It depends on how fast, right? But then I also, in fact, I was talking to one of my key people just the other day and just said, hey, man, and I'm guilty of this too, I ignore too many red flags.
Sure.
I want to see the best
Absolutely.
in everybody.
Absolutely.
And I do see the best.
Give
I
the
see the
benefit of the
potential.
doubt.
Give them benefit of
Right.
the doubt. It's like, well, they wouldn't have said that, or
Right.
they were probably just having a bad day, or you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we have got to address everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to address things from a place of fear, because we've done that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had someone who was cancerous in the organization that we didn't know conversations were happening until months later.
Yeah.
And it was a mess to clean up, and there was some damage and a lot of damage control. So then the next negative thing you hear, you just kind of jump, the pendulum swings. And you're like, hey, we don't, you just kind of jump on them. And they're like, whoa, I just made a passive comment,
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of one of those, there is a balance.
So the way that I envision this is that there's really two lanes that you got to be on. Lane number one is we'll go through these things to make sure that from the organizational side that we're living up to our end of the bargain.
Yep.
But then secondly, like you said, there is a degree to which if somebody is, hate to use the word cancerous, but ultimately they got to go.
Yeah.
And so there's two rails you got to ride on.
Yes.
And, this is just part of running a business is, you got to be fair, but you have to be tough when you need to be tough.
Yep.
And that's a hard balance for a lot of people to get perfectly right. I don't think anyone has it perfectly right.
Yep.
But so what do managers do that kill engagement? So number one, lack of recognition and feedback. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I go back to the first thing I talked about with the pandemic. I'm just not a fan of remote work, like it's just hard for me because I just know what I would do.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I would do the bare minimum and then play video games.
I would
solitaire.
have one of those little mouse movers going, where it's like,
yeah. Oh, he's working hard.
oh, look at that mouse. That mouse is moving.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I just know, so, even, so like our technicians, right? So we have GPS trackers. And one of the things we started tracking a couple months ago is idle time in your van.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is there 2 hours of sitting in your van a day with it running?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing for 2 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
lunch, 30 minutes, sit there, maybe, look at fill out an invoice, next job, but for 2 hours? Paperwork. Yeah. So it's like, hey, if for now, if there's downtime, come back to the warehouse, come back to the office.
Yeah.
We'll find something for you to do.
Yeah. And again, I know that there's differing opinions on this. I get it. And, this big company of the day comes out. It's like, oh, we believe in our people. Yeah. They're staying at home. And then somebody else is like, nope, everybody back.
Yeah. Well, that was a big thing with Elon and Twitter, right?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, come back to the office.
Yeah. Well, look, it's human nature, right? I mean, if you're my boss and I'm in your vicinity and I know that, I'm being watched, observed, which is part of your job, by the way, to observe me and my work. Then, listen, I'm just going to be a little bit more on my game. Yeah. If I'm at home and you're not watching me, I don't care who you are, there is going to be a tendency to say, well, hey, man, maybe I could get a little Zelda in.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the leadership adage, and it's cheesy, but it's so true, is you can't expect what you don't inspect, right? And so for a small business, I can see a big business having some really, really great checks and balances and some leadership framework to remote might work. Mm-hmm. But for a small business, you don't have the resource allocation to be able to do that, right? Yeah. You don't have the money for whatever software it would take. You don't have the human capital to watch every little thing. Yeah. And so it just makes it tough. Yeah.
Okay, but back to
it. Yes. And this is another fine line too, because when you talk about this, I hate having just a bunch of meetings, right? Mm-hmm. And we just added some new meetings to one of my organizations, and it pains me, but I'm like, well, I don't know how else to have these conversations. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a weekly conversation that's 15 to 30 minutes that says, hey, this is what you did last week. This is our expectations. You either exceeded them or you didn't. What are you going to do to change that? Let's set goals for the next week. Like that, it needs to happen.
So in the lack of recognition and feedback, would you say that you're going to use this meeting to work on recognition, work on feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is. I think that it's, and in fact, I really like, one of the things I've really picked up from our coach Aaron is you can have an opinion looking at the data, but let them give their opinion. Hey, it looks like we expected you to book $10,000 in revenue last week, and it looks like you only did $6,000. Why do you think that is? Let them answer it.
Yeah.
Right. And because they're always going to be more harsh on themselves
and
than
get into
you
the
are.
controllables, right? Like what was controllable?
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, how much do you think you can do next week? Oh, 12,000. Okay, we're going to write that down, 12,000.
So
then you meet again, right?
That's feedback, right?
That's feedback.
Yeah.
That's feedback. But I think that it's more powerful when they come up with the solution.
I agree.
And it's coming up with, hey, why do you think this keeps happening? Hey, why were you on call last weekend and you didn't book a single job,
Or how can we?
Yeah. Well, what can we do to improve that? Right.
Yeah.
And so, what I've found is just knowing you're shining a light on it, course corrects a lot.
Right.
Just saying, hey, we're going to start tracking idle time. We're going to start tracking your specific numbers in your van, not just the whole department, but just you specifically. We're going to start tracking these things.
Yeah. Well, listen, I feel like you got a lot of feedback to give right now because the answer to me was more oriented around recognition, and you've really focused in on feedback. So I feel like you're really wanting to give a lot of feedback now.
Well, I'm recognizing. Maybe I recognize the negative. Well, you always go into the, and it's cheesy too. One of the best books I ever read was The 1 Minute Manager. I mean, it's a classic book, and it's just how do you reprimand, and that's the whole thing, is that these conversations should last 5 minutes or less. When you're having to have that reprimand. But you always start with, you always have these conversations with something positive, recognition. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, man, there's nothing good no good recognition I can find.
Right.
And so you're just like,
right.
Well,
and so to drive engagement, I think.
Well, it's like, hey, you showed up to work 5 days last week. That's a plus. Good job.
You got some stuff you're working out right now. I really feel it. I had a guy the other day who was a customer, and he pointed out someone who had done a good job for him. Yeah. And he just kept going, like how incredible it was. And listen, it was a very good job that the guy did.
Yeah.
And he just kept going. And I was thinking to myself, it's been a long time since this guy's been recognized at his job.
Oh yeah.
And I think
here's my fault. I see the good that my people are doing, and I recognize them in my mind.
That leads us to point number 2.
But
keep going.
I also give recognition to peers, or to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll brag on my people, but not in front of them.
Right.
And I will be, and then, then we get salaries. I'm like, well, no, go talk to that person and just ask how I talked about you last week. Like, I said great things about you.
Yeah.
But I don't make a point. Sometimes I do, but I don't always make a point to make sure that gets back to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I'll brag on them, and I see it, but it doesn't always get to them. Yep.
Well, so point number 2, poor communication.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is something along these lines of, hey, I've recognized, but maybe I have not spoken directly.
Well,
to
I think that we sometimes feel like we do a good job communicating because we say something once.
Well, in my head, I've done a great job.
Or we told them one time.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing too, is what would they say? Like, your people aren't going to get it until they hear it like 7 times.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me go off on a rabbit hunt here. In college, I always thought the degree, and I have a really good friend who's got one of these degrees, communication was kind of a joke.
Yeah.
I went to a communication class and I was looking around like, what is this?
Yeah.
This is such a waste of time. Why am I here?
Yeah.
And I've come to learn that communication is work.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying. Well, we told him one time.
Yeah.
And it's like, nope, not good enough. Yeah. It's work to actively communicate the right things.
I think that all these things we talk about, it really goes into this emotional intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. Because even recognition is different for every single person. I mean, everybody likes to be told that they're doing well.
Yeah.
But, recognizing something for something you think is great, but they don't think is worth, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or even, or even thinking of their motivation, what motivates them. Recognition motivates everybody, but it motivates some people a whole lot, and some people it doesn't mean a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
They're more motivated by other things. But then even going into communication, how do you communicate, right? And you have how many people are in your organization?
50, 60, something like that.
And you have 50 ways to communicate.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just different. And so that's why I tell people, hey, to communicate with me, just give me facts. Don't butter me up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need the small talk. Just give me the facts.
Straight.
Just give it
straight
to me.
hard.
Yeah.
Straight hard and in.
Yeah. But some people, you're just like, hey, you have to be very gentle.
Yeah.
Very gentle.
That's right.
Because they won't hear the message you're saying if you don't approach it the right way.
Right.
They'll just be so offended.
Number 3, micromanagement.
Well, let me talk about this. Let me go back to communication. What do y'all have a company-wide communication tool that y'all use?
We had tried to do like an internal memo, and probably because the content wasn't stellar, it was very stale.
Yeah.
And so, but come to find out that like nobody was reading it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
We have a couple of all hands meetings throughout the year.
Yeah.
And we were able to do a little there, but yeah, we got to do way better. And for us, not everybody's on email. If everybody's on
Yeah.
email, it's easy,
Yeah.
right? Just email
Yeah.
everybody out.
Text is way better, right? But then you don't want them on their phone.
Right. Right. So
But
there's no one great channel.
There's no one great channel. I always go back to, all these like Slack and, the different tools to communicate with your business.
Well, those are
Then
good
you
for
have-
knowledge workers.
And then you
not-
have, like the city of Shreveport yesterday, I saw, they said brand new app comes out for communication about this, what's going on with the city. I'm like, why would you waste that money?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have Facebook.
Yeah.
Everybody's on Facebook.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
in our main communication tool for Berkshire Hathaway with, over 200 people, I think we have 175 in the closed group, but it's just a closed Facebook group.
Interesting.
Any important message goes to Facebook because they're on it all the time. Every single person in that company has a Facebook account that they're active on it.
Yeah.
Right. So like, why would we spend the money to pay for a service that nobody's going to check? Right. Like, I'm on like 10 group me's. I haven't opened up group me in months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like my wife opens it and interprets. Hey, we have this going on. I'm like, oh really? Yeah.
didn't know.
Why did they just wait to announce that? Like, no, they announced it several weeks ago on our group me. I'm like, well, I'm not on group me. That's
Didn't know.
another app I have to download. I'm not doing
Right.
it.
Yeah. I don't want to do that.
No.
Okay. So back to micromanagement.
Okay.
Number 3.
Micromanagement.
Yes. Killing engagement.
Yes. And that's really good. I'm starting to dig into the book that our coach uses a lot, but the energy, the 7 levels of energy leader. I think I sent that to you.
You did?
But yeah, that I feel like micromanaging is a result of being on that lowest level of energy, which is you're really managing out of fear, right?
Yeah.
And man, that's just a micromanaging will burn out the leader and the employer and the employee.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a lack of training. It's a lack of process. It goes into that
Trust.
too. Lack of trust. So yeah, you can see it. If somebody's just looking over your shoulder for something that maybe you are competent with, that's deflating.
Yeah.
Of course.
But there's also, Adam always brings up just random things he's picked up over the years, but he talks about, I don't know what the word is, but it's a Japanese word. And that's what they do, right? They stand over to improve processes. They just have somebody stand over your shoulder and watch every single thing you're doing.
It's like constant improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's exactly what they mean by that is micromanagement. I think they're talking about a literal constant improvement cycle.
Yeah.
But who knows? Different culture.
Who knows?
Number
Different
4.
culture. Good food.
Yeah. Number 4, complacent leadership.
How many of these do we have?
We have 7 to get to. That's why I'm trying to move.
Okay. Keep me on task here.
Yeah. So complacent leadership. This is a big one. Big one. Complacent leadership. Deflating engagement.
Sorry, go back to the other one, micromanaging. You're saying that's a healthy habit or unhealthy?
No. These are things that kill engagement.
Kill engagement. Yep. Yeah. Well, I think that, when you go back to micromanaging, what happens is when you set that as your style of management, there's no reason for them to be engaged, right? They're like, well, my person's going to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to think for myself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what one of my team leaders is like, man, I'm just like all day long, my team is just calling me with problems to solve. He's like, what do I do? I'm like, well, quit answering your phone.
Yeah.
Like, let them leave you a voicemail or a text, call them back an hour later. I guarantee you they would have they're going to have it solved.
Build autonomy.
Yes.
Right. By detaching.
And if they've been with the company for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they are still doing this, then you're failing as their leader in training them.
Right.
So, all right, go. Sorry, I digress.
All right.
Number four.
Complacent. We're doing two different podcasts at the same time.
Yes. Complacent.
Complacent leadership. That's killing in American employee engagement.
Yes. Well, I think it's very easy for us to set the cruise control or to shift it in neutral. You get some speed, you get some momentum. It's very easy.
Human nature.
Yes. And I do that. And I have people in my organization that do that. Mm-hmm. So how do you fight that?
That's a good question. So I think it has to come back to mission. And I can see where a lot of people look. I've been through this. I've been super hungry, and I've worked really hard, and I've seen progress, results, and ultimately reward. And when you see reward, you start to go, all right, I made it, man. I'm good. Mm-hmm. I could just sit here and do literally nothing and just show up and let it all happen.
Yeah.
And that's when you're in danger.
Yeah. And that's what you look at the Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. They were always hungry. They were never satisfied.
Right.
Not saying that's a good thing, right? Because we've talked about that before. At some point, what's enough is enough.
Well, directionally, what is your mission, right?
Yeah.
So if your mission is I want to conquer the world and slit everybody's throats, then that's probably the wrong mission.
Yeah.
But if your mission is grounded in what we would know to be spiritual truth, then I think that it's more than fine to say, man, I am so driven by my mission that I can't let my foot off the gas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I had my coaching call yesterday with Aaron, and he brought up goal setting, and I was like, I just have no desire to set like a generic numbers type goal.
5%.
Like, it's just not even fun for me. It's just not even you're right. Or even short term goals. To me, it's like more these huge concepts and like 5-year goals, right? But and short term goals are needed. Mm-hmm. But how do you craft a goal that you're excited about? Because that's normally what it is, right? It's you did X amount of dollars this year. Let's increase that by 20%. Let's now let's go back and reverse engineer and let's look at your controllables. But that just is draining to me. It does not get me excited at all.
Right. And then you think about your leaders in your companies that are really in the same boat, and that may not be the most exciting thing for them either. Yeah. So complacent leadership, you can see how easy it is to trickle all the way down. Yeah. And if you know that your leader's checked out, what are the odds that you're going to be like, oh man, I'm just going to bust it because this guy up here is just sitting in his hammock all day long. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's where it goes back into ignoring the red flags, right? I think part of it's just addressing it, telling them, hey, I see that you're on a roller coaster. You can be real all in for 2 weeks and then you just take off a week and you're not all in anymore. Mm-hmm. One thing when we were out of town last week, the very first day we're at Disney, and I get a phone call from one of my key people, and I'm like, well, he knows it wouldn't be a call if it wasn't really important, so I knew it was bad. So I answer, which I rarely do these days on trips, but we had some downtime, like 20 minutes. So I pick up the phone and he's like, yeah, hey, this person got another job offer they want to take. and I haven't really had much luck convincing them not to take it. So I get on the phone with this person and, have a conversation with them, and, he ended up staying with the company and everything's good. But when I got back in town and I met with him, I said, what are your thoughts about, kind of what's happened the past week? And he said, well, my first thing is the fact that you would stop what you're doing on a vacation and address this and talk to me. It really showed that I mattered.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that sucks, because I could have had this conversation a week ago and not been bothered.
Hit me up before I leave.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Give you a little heads up.
Yeah. Okay, well, so maybe this dovetails into the next point, number 5, neglecting development.
Okay.
This is killing engagement. Companies neglecting development. Why don't we develop?
Well, I think that you have to, right? I mean, I always say to my people, like, don't let the company outgrow you. And that's what this really gets into, is that your skill set is great for where we're at as a company right now, but you have to be better and, a better leader, a better technician, a better whatever, the bigger we get. Mm-hmm. So you have to be growing, or the company will outgrow you.
Yeah. And
whenever that happens, it's kind of blaring obvious that, hey, you did not grow with the company. So yeah, I think that it's two ways. I think that there is a responsibility for us, but I also think there's a responsibility on them,
Right.
I think that part of that's just asking questions. Like, there are some people in the organization that don't want to grow and are okay just being a entry-level position.
Right. Or wherever they make it to. And listen, everybody, me and you included, are going to hit our ceiling.
Yeah.
Where our natural God-given talents are insufficient to go to the next level, right?
Yeah.
Like, everybody's going to hit that moment.
Yes.
I think in that moment, as I've been reflecting on this with some of our team members, of, have they hit the top of that ceiling, is maybe they have hit the top of that ceiling, but we can work with them in the next room or the next room over, where we can maybe broaden.
Sure.
And just come to the realization that this is it as far as this way.
Yep.
But as far as left and right go, we can certainly make improvements. And here's what that's going to do, or what it should do. If we're here to improve quality of life, which I believe we are, we can make this person's work more enjoyable by developing that breadth, with the understanding that, as far as what's the up and down movement, the vertical movement's concerned, may not be possible, but we can certainly try to improve the quality of their life and work by growing other skills, right?
Yeah. Well, and I've also seen, and this goes back into the scarcity mindset, there are some people that don't want their team to develop. Mm-hmm. They don't want the competition.
Yes.
Right? You find that a lot in the trades.
Yes.
Right? If I tell this guy really how to do all this, they're going to leave and compete against me.
Yep.
And I think that that's just the nature of it, right? I mean, it just is. And that's what, I remember talking to, in a therapy session with Clint, and he just said, hey, are you God? Like, are you the one that should be saying what these guys do with their lives?
Right.
Or
how about this? You've got somebody in a position where they are absolutely killing it. Mm-hmm. And you know that there's more, and you're like, but they're doing so good here.
Oh, yeah.
We got such a, steady waters.
Yeah.
And man, it would be nice to just keep this person here forever because they're so good at this thing. But we know, that there's more for them.
There's more there. Yep.
Yeah. Number 6, not acting on feedback. Not acting on feedback.
Yep.
Killing engagement. What do you think?
I think that feedback, there's healthy and unhealthy feedback. Mm-hmm. Right?
They sound offensive, by the way.
I think that not all feedback is weighted equally in my mind.
Yes.
Right? And so I'm considering the source for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's always, and that's always tricky.
But let's take that as a given. Let's take it as a given that maybe, you're going to have some wild opinions out there. But let's say you get a consensus on something.
Okay.
So ball's in your court.
Yeah.
Now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want feedback. I mean, I want my guys to be thinking on ways they can improve everything that they're doing. And I kind of have given, I'm kind of a hands-off person and want them to take that and run with it. That comes down to empowering them to make these decisions. But feedback is big. I mean, we have in the real estate company, we do quarterly anonymous surveys.
Oh, how do those go?
Well, usually pretty good. We did have a disgruntled agent one time that made fun of the way I dressed. And then she left.
That was me, by the way.
And then she left the next day.
It was anonymous.
So, yeah, it was anonymous, but I think that we could conclude who this was. I want to say, hey, quit wearing those silly hats. You're not 13 years old. I think that's what it said. So, and look, I'm just trying to cover up some bald spots.
Look, you've heard the feedback, right? You have acted on that feedback. Well done.
Well done. Yes. So, no more hats. No. So we laugh at some of that, but that goes back to the feedback is considering the source, right? But we do an anonymous feedback. Now we've gotten it a lot more shorter and easy to take, and kind of narrowed it down instead of just like, hey, here's 30 areas, rate each one, and it's just too much, right?
Yeah.
And so just quick, like more of, hey, how can we support you better? Do you see any, or do you have any concerns? Stuff like, would you invite someone to work at this company? Why or why not? Like just those type of questions. Yeah. And so, so those go well.
Right.
I think that what tends to happen if we don't have a feedback loop, we're making changes and decisions on, we're reactionary leading, right? Mm-hmm. We're waiting until crap hits the fan.
Yeah.
Or because if there's not feedback, they're going to suppress that. It's going to come out.
Mm-hmm. Or somebody leaves.
You want it to come out in a proactive way.
Yeah.
And in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. No, listen, I've been on the wrong side of not acting on feedback or things I knew to be true.
Yeah, I think that's the first step is there has to be a proper channel for feedback. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's another thing too, is teaching your people, hey, how do you give feedback?
Yeah. Because
the natural way for them to give feedback is peer-to-peer, which is divisive in your company,
mm-hmm.
right? And so I always say, hey, if you're talking to someone that has no ability to solve the issue you have, then you're just gossiping.
Yeah.
Like you are literally hurting the company.
Yeah.
And then being very clear, here is who you give your feedback to or your concerns to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Number 7.
What do you think?
On what?
Is that it? Is that it? Yeah.
Okay. Number 7. Inconsistent or unfair policies.
I've also go back to feedback. The best way to stop the wrong feedback is to just stop them and say, hey, you know what? Let me get that person in here and let's all talk about it. Since so if they were like gossiping or if they're complaining or something and it's a divisive thing, then I'll just bring in the other person. She's like, hey, why don't we just address it right here? And that stops them real quick,
Yeah.
So
it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Number 7. Part 2.
I don't want it to end, Josh.
All
right.
I know.
Number 7.
Inconsistent or unfair policies. Killing feedback.
Inconsistent. Killing engagement.
Killing engagement.
Inconsistent.
Or unfair policies.
Well, what would you say is an example of unfair policies?
This one is probably one of the most challenging because it's just the inconsistency, right?
Yep.
I mean, there's someone that maybe you really, really like and you don't want to hold them to the same account as somebody who you just think is just much lower on the, the value chain. And so,
well, I mean, and that the Move Your Bus book is really good because he's like, he says, when a runner makes a mistake, what do I do about it? He's like, I do nothing about it. because they're runners. They're going to make mistakes. Anybody that's out there just crushing it and doing stuff, they're going to make mistakes. Right. So it goes back to that. But he also in that book said something really great. He's like, and I think that this kind of goes back to just kind of our culture we're in. Everybody thinks that, they're either treated unfairly or they should be treated fairly. And they should. Where I think the confusion is that being treated fairly and being treated equal are two different things. And so we don't treat everyone equal, but we do treat everyone fair.
Right.
But treating someone equal would mean that, your value to the company, whether you have low value to the company or high value to the company, then you're getting the same treatment. And I don't know if you do that.
So that's a very, I'm going to use a fancy word, utilitarian way to look at it.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to unpack that for.
I understand that. Somebody
who's just trying to.
But I do think that it is a good principle to say and tell our people, hey, we are going to treat you fair, but we also are going to. Not everybody's treated equal in an organization.
Yeah. So killing engagement.
I mean, can you do that? Can you give the perks of one of your top managers to the entry level person?
No, I don't think so. And I do think people have maybe a better sense of the justice than what we're kind of alluding to in terms of like, you're right. I mean, there's definitely a value exchange between different people and what they do and what they contribute. And I do think that, like for example, if somebody has an outside sales role in our company, they're not expected to show up at 8:00 on the dot
Yep.
and be there until 5. The expectation is that they can go out and do
Sure.
the work, and we're not just closely monitoring that.
Sure.
So in that way, I think everybody understands that of, hey, it's just a different role, it's a different task that they're given,
Yep.
and they're not required to do the same
Sure.
things as everybody else.
But if you have an expectation that they all wear company uniform, and you have one of your sales guys just showing up wearing his, Metallica t-shirt.
Yep. Oh, happened the other day.
Okay. Leonard Skinner.
Right.
It needs to be addressed.
It had to be addressed. Like, hey, don't come here looking like that because
we have a standard.
Right. That's not fair.
That's not fair.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that's it. And man, what a challenge this one is.
A huge challenge.
Because again, it's so easy. Our human nature is to play favorites in a sense, right? There's people who make your life like, man, I don't want this person to go anywhere.
Yeah.
This person makes my life easier.
Yeah.
And so, I'm willing to work with them as the new person on the block where they don't know much and you're kind of like, I don't know if they're going to make it.
Yeah.
You're going to hold them to a pretty tight
Sure.
standard on the way in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So we talked about 7 ways that American employees, or what managers are doing to kill engagement in American employees.
Yes.
And I would have to say that as all these companies are converging on this idea, it's so important that we get it right. And here's why. We've talked about this before. Competitive advantage. Very slim. Very slim. Not many companies have extreme competitive advantage, like legitimate.
Sure.
Either by price, like, hey, Mint Mobile,
Yep.
what's his name is out there, and he's selling cell phones for Ryan Reynolds.
Yep.
$5, man, for cell phones.
Well, I just read where one of your competitors is filing bankruptcy. The cheap, whatever the place, the old Kmart, what's that called?
You talking about Cheap or Dirt Cheap?
Dirt Cheap. They're shutting down 100 stores.
Really? I didn't know that.
I'm like, oh, so you can't sell things for dirt cheap and stay open?
Wild.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
That's our competitive advantage. That they're cheaper than you.
Was cheap. And so live by the sword, die by the sword in
Absolutely.
that way. So if true competitive advantage is that hard to come by, and I believe it is.
Yeah.
I believe for you, with your competition, it's very difficult to go exactly why you're 8 times better than your competition. It's just hard to ferret out.
Sure.
I can't do it for my company, right?
Yeah.
I can say where I think we're better than the average bear, but I can't come out and look at all 5 competitors and go, we destroy them on every metric. No way.
Sure.
So that's hard to come by.
Yep.
So why is engagement so important? Because in the competitive sphere, at the margins, the real competitive advantage seems to be training and engagement. Training and engagement.
Yeah.
We can go back to mission sort of being over that and
Yeah.
bucketed over that. But that's, if there is competitive advantage in the marketplace, it seems to be in training and engagement. Because if it's not price, what is it?
Yeah.
Right? We're doing the same exact thing. The
Yeah.
only difference is my people actually care
Yeah.
about what our company, and they care about our customers. Perhaps yours don't care as much.
Yeah.
Who's going to win?
Sure.
Right? So why is this so important? Why are so many people thinking about it? I think that's because true competitive advantage is so hard to find.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to the Chick-fil-A versus McDonald's,
100%.
right? Is that, you know, to add value to your company, you can lower cost or make it cheaper, right? Or you can do what's difficult, which is invest in your employees,
Right.
train them, engage them. It's easier just to lower the price.
Yeah. And it's so evident, right?
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
evident with the Chick-fil-A team members that most of them feel much more engaged
Yeah.
than the average other fast
Yeah.
food worker.
Absolutely.
So what's different? Are they paying that much more? Probably. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm sure they are paying more.
Well, yeah.
I
But it
don't know.
reflects,
It probably has a mission. This is probably a
it's
mission
a mission.
driven. Yeah.
It's got to be a mission thing,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
got to be a mission thing.
Let's have some Chick-fil-A guys on.
I would love it.
Bring in some nuggets.
I would love it. Listen, I think we got to
All
wrap
right.
this up.
Yes, let's do it.
Good.
That's it.
Yeah, good stuff.
Do we want to give any shout outs or anything?
Chick-fil-A?